Hi everybody, my name's Andrew and today I'm driving my 2016 Audi Q5. Over the summer I purchased this B8.5 Q5 to be my new daily driver. And initially my intention was to sort of save money for a few months and replace my Audi S4 more directly in the new calendar year. However, as of September, I have also now owned a Mazda Miata RF, and if you saw my video recently with that car, I complained about a few things that I've started to dislike about the RF. And naturally, after living with this for 6 months, I've come up with a few things I don't like about it either. So that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. And if you haven't seen my first video with this, it's a 2016 Q5 2-liter Premium Plus with a technology package. And as such, basically as fully loaded as you could get a Q5 of this generation. And ironically, most of my complaints are actually related to the technology and features that this car has, which is due in part to the fact that this Gen Q5 effectively came out in 2009. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a little preface. It's kind of to be expected, these things I don't like about them, but not necessarily to the extreme that this car has. But the good news is, since they're all tech related, or mostly tech related, I can talk about them in the car, because it's quite cold today. Of all my complaints, I'll start with what is probably the weakest one first, and that's to do with the infotainment connections in this car, or mobile device connections, I should say. This infotainment is effectively 14 years old, like I said before, but it's honestly not a bad system overall. I mean, the navigation maps aren't really up to date, but the nav itself is actually still perfectly fine. And it's easy to navigate. You've got your little rotary dial and button array down here. Everything is ergonomic, and it's honestly not bad. But when you want to pair your phone to it, it can be quite annoying. Now, I can easily live without Apple CarPlay or Sirius XM radio or things like that, but if I'm going to have to live without those things, I would like the Bluetooth to be at least somewhat decent. And the Bluetooth in this car is not. It takes absolutely forever to recognize any device when you get in and start the car. For reference, when I first bought this car, my commute to work was 6 to 7 minutes long. And oftentimes in the morning, it would take almost half that trip before it would actually start playing anything. And if I sat and let the car warm up for a few minutes in the parking lot first, most of the time it would only just barely connect as I was leaving, which I guess is fine, but it's not ideal. And once your phone does decide to connect, actually controlling what you're listening to can also be a little bit annoying, because while there is a volume scroll wheel and mute button on the steering wheel, there's no track controls, meaning if you want to move forward or backward in your playlist or whatever you're listening to, your only two options are either to reach down here and use the other volume knob, which you can push side to side, or what I end up doing most of the time, since I have this phone mount right here, this is how I get my navigation and such since I don't have Apple CarPlay, is I just unlock my phone and control it right here, which frankly is easier than reaching down here, but it would be nice to not have to take your hands off the wheel at all. Alright, well, gotta be honest, this video is really not going to plan today. After the last clip you just saw, I was trying to take my nice Sony off the tripod and dropped it, so the lens is busted and won't go in or out, so the camera won't recognize it. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm probably going to order a new lens. I might take this as an opportunity to upgrade. But you know what? I figured this would be a good opportunity for the rest of this video to try out my new Insta360 that I got on Black Friday. And so if the quality is a little bit different, that's why. But here we are. Got to make the best of it, I suppose. So anyway, continuing on the subject of phone connections, as I mentioned previously, your phone connection and power source choices are somewhat limited in this Q5. The good news is, if you need a 12-volt socket, you're in luck, because there's a ton of them. There's one in the center console here, there's one in the back seat, and there's one in the cargo area. But if you need a USB port, well, I guess you better buy a little adapter plug like I have in there, because that's the only way you're going to get one. And for some reason, if you want to connect your phone in a way other than Bluetooth, i.e. a wired connection, your only choice, for some reason, is this hilariously old school... Oh, I guess it is actually a lightning connector. For some reason, I thought it was an 8-pin or a 32-pin iPod connector, but it is actually a lightning connector. So I guess there's that. But, I mean, what about all the people that have Androids? There's like 40-something% of the population in this country that uses Android. So I guess if you have one of those, you're shit out of luck in this car. There's no aux input or USB ports anywhere. And getting off of the infotainment now, we need to talk about the climate controls. The climate controls in this car are pretty straightforward down here. I mean, it's just regular dual zone automatic climate control. There's really nothing wrong with it. The only thing is that there's not really an obvious way to synchronize these climate zones. And I'm not really sure why. It's something I've complained about with BMW products in the past, that there's no sync button. And initially, I thought that was just how this car was as well. I didn't really think anything of it. But then, randomly, late one night in a Target parking lot, I discovered that if you actually hold down these two knobs individually, or not individually, together, I mean, simultaneously, it does actually sync the temperatures. So I guess that's kind of nice. But I just wish it was more obvious. Sure, I could have looked it up in the owner's manual or on the internet, but I'm sure there's a good percentage of the drivers of this car that, like me, just wouldn't think anything of it. And lastly, blind spots. In my Miata, I complained about the rear-facing blind spots on either side being huge due to the way that the hardtop is designed. However, in this car, I actually have the opposite issue. Huge blind zones in the front corners. This is kind of twofold, really. It's one, because of the rather large side view mirrors on the Q5, which ordinarily would be a good thing to have. They're great size mirrors. They're great for parking and such. But, of course, the angle of the 360 camera, or the wide angle lens, I should say, distorts it a little bit. But they do block quite a lot. I mean, you can kind of see there's like a whole little like valley down there that from driving position, from eye height, you can't see it at all. And also there's no quarter windows up here like in most SUVs. Ironically, it's actually instead the home of the blind spot monitoring button. And somebody's calling me. And of course the speaker for the Bang & Olufsen sound system. But these two things combined together mean that you have a solid, like, foot, maybe foot and a half right here, where you just can't see anything, really. And it is also partially dependent on your driving position. Now my music is playing. This video is just a shit show, honestly. It is partially dependent on your driving position, because if you're like me, I have the seat as close to the ground as it can go, and it's right in my line of sight. The mirror is almost level with my head. Now, if I sat up a little bit higher, it's a little bit better, but then, I mean, my head is almost touching the ceiling. So, you know, it's just not ideal. Overall, despite these grievances, much like my Miata, I still do enjoy driving and living with the Q5. It is superbly comfortable. It's decently quick for what it is. It's super practical, and the technology honestly is adequate, though certainly nothing beyond that. And I look forward to potentially another 6 months and 6,000 or 7,000 miles to come. And with that, that's where I'm going to wrap this video up. As always, thanks for tuning in, and consider subscribing for plenty more content with this car and others.